Hello members of the awarding body, I am Andrea and together with my groupmates Nikki, Anna, Isabelle and Nadia, we will present our proposal for shelter intervention in Libya where we aim to use a classification model to guide the effective allocation of the USD $500,000 grant. Here is an outline of our presentation. I will start off with the background context of the current situation in Libya, with my groupmates presenting on the model justification, our VBA code, proposed intervention measures, and finally, monetary allocation. Libya is facing a severe humanitarian crisis marked by prolonged conflict and political instability and made worse by natural disasters. Notably, after the collapse of the Derna dams in 2023, tens of thousands of people were displaced with no aid or solutions provided, revealing deep inadequacies in housing and infrastructure. In West Libya, migrants and refugees are trapped in detention centers that are poorly managed, making the living situation of migrants deplorable to varying degrees. Given the complexity of the situation, our group proposes using the grant to build durable, long-term shelters in areas of the greatest need. To identify these areas, we developed the classification model, which my groupmates will explain next.
Shown here is our tree diagram. Our first branch is based on whether each muhala had ranked shelter in its top priority. This would indicate that shelter is a dire necessity and hence determine the areas to be covered by humanitarian action. Although strict, this cutoff is necessary due to our financial constraints, which will be explained later on. This criterion is also the fairest as it does not discriminate based on refugee characteristics and hence is the best determinant for the initial categorization. The second branch is based on whether 30% or more of the population are living in non-rented accommodations like abandoned buildings. The Q3 percentage was chosen similarly due to the constraints. Those living in rented housing would imply that they have a more stable roof over their heads and access to basic necessities. Contrastingly, staying in unstable housing would leave refugees more vulnerable to the elements and illness. Hence, if the majority of refugees have stable shelter, even if they had shelter as a top need, they are still considered low need. The third branch is concerned with whether women and children constitute 14.4%, the median, or more of a population. This criteria, while important, is of a lower priority and hence the cutoff is less strict. Women are disproportionately affected by crises due to the additional need for reproductive health services and higher risk of sexual exploitation. Children are also more vulnerable as they have a weaker immune system and higher risk of developmental stunting. Hence, while every person in a humanitarian crisis should be entitled to humanitarian aid, the additional needs of women and children should be considered. The final branching is determined by population size, with a more lenient cutoff of 200, the Q1 percentage. A higher population size would have a greater risk of infection outbreaks, especially since many refugees already lack access to sanitation facilities. A greater population size also has a faster rate of resource usage. Thus, with all things considered, areas that fulfill all these criteria are in most urgent need of aid.
So now I'll be presenting on our classification model and VBA code. So this column here shows our formula. So everything here is classified with our formula. But if I click classify, this row shows our VBA code and it classifies all our data for us. And if I click check, it tells me if there are any mismatches. And there are 0 mismatches because our formula and code are correct. So everything is highlighted in green. Yeah. So if I just want to do a double check to make sure that my code works, I click check. So now it tells me that there are 2 mismatches and it highlights it in red. And if I click reset, then everything resets back to normal. And based on our classification model, we identified that there are 12 high need areas, 31 medium need areas, and 590 low need areas.
For our intervention, our goal is to move beyond short-term emergency tents and invest in durable and protective shelter systems that meaningfully improve safety and living standards for displaced families. We are proposing modular PVC and insulated steel frame shelters. Each modular shelter unit for 5 to 6 people is budgeted at $3.5 thousand US, inclusive of transport and installation. We anticipate full deployment within approximately 10 weeks, and they'll have a 5 to 10 year lifespan, making them suitable for immediate relief and medium-term recovery. They are heat-resistant, flood-resistant, lightweight, and fast to deploy, which is crucial given Libya's climate conditions and logistical constraints. evidence supports this approach. Steel frame shelters have demonstrated improved performance in disaster environments, offering both resilience and transport efficiency. It is important to note that many occupants of the high-need sites currently live in rented housing. Hence, rather than unnecessarily allocating all our finances to build shelters for every refugee, we will instead redirect some funds towards crucial protection-focused upgrades for existing structures. We'll focus on installing lockable doors for household security, gender-segregated sanitation and female-safe wash areas, solar-powered lighting to ensure nighttime safety, and designated child-safe zones within shelter clusters. These upgrades directly address documented risk of sexual violence and nighttime insecurity faced by women and children in the Libyan displacement settings. Ultimately, our concept of shelter isn't just about having a roof overhead. It's about ensuring a safe, dignified, and secure space that feels like home. Nadia will now continue with the detailed budget breakdown and funding allocation model.
While Isabelle has explained the intervention design, I will explain our budget allocations. We intend to fully allocate our grant funding to the 12 high-need sites based on our model's classification. Within the 12 sites, we will split it based on funding, maintenance, and miscellaneous through a 70-20-10% way. Around 70% or $350,000 will target areas in need of shelter through the installation of 100 shelters, where immediate shelter deprivation and gender-based protection risks are most prevalent. Prioritizing these sites is necessary as each unit directly houses displaced families and reduces overcrowding. Identified as a major determinant of mortality, with research showing leading causes such as diarrhea and malaria are largely preventable infectious diseases driven by overcrowding conditions. Approximately $100,000 will support sites where existing shelters may be structurally stable but lack adequate sanitation and lighting. We will improve these too, with emphasis on female-safe wash areas and solar lighting for nighttime protection. Investment here prevents further deterioration and addresses secondary risks such as gender-based violence. The remaining 10% or $50,000 will be allocated to sites that focus on preventive maintenance, monitoring, and measures to ensure continued stability. This allocation is cost efficient as preventive intervention is significantly cheaper than post-crisis reconstruction. Additionally, a small portion of this budget, a 5% contingency, is reserved for logistical purposes like local labor and training to reduce external dependency. We emphasize that this approach maximizes impact by targeting the most urgent gaps first while retaining flexibility for ongoing maintenance. This plan ensures every allocation improves the different social and spatial vulnerabilities identified in our model and achieves our commitment to need-based and economic efficiency. Thank you for your time.